If that Reddit post didn't take off, I might not be working on the game anymore because I would have just run out of money and also been demotivated, I think, because I struggle when I see other developers put their game up on Steam and then I see them post about their sales and they're like, I spent 2 years working on this game and I've got like 12 sales, and I just, like, breaks my heart because I know how much work they put into it, and the system is just cutthroat. It's ruthless. Most games they're just not going to get enough attention. But if it takes off, if Reddit hits the front page, it's just crazy. There was a massive one at the very end of last year, end of 2018, where it hit the front page, and then 4 days later, it hit the front page again. And my game actually became, this is kind of a bit strange, but it actually became technically the 10th most played game on Steam of all time.
You've been listening to Ben Johnson talk about his game Geneshift, and this is Emotive. I'm your host, Dan, and today we're talking to Ben Johnson about his 10-year journey developing his game. Now, I know that sounds strange, but that's really the reason why I wanted to do this episode so bad, was to hear his side of the story. Why he decided to continue developing this game for 10 years when most people would have given up at the beginning, in the middle, anywhere. But he has a unique approach to life, and there's some good lessons to be learned for developers in there too. We talk about how Geneshift evolved from a resume building project when he finished school to his world travels, and now to where his game is almost out of early access and the hopeful future. You can follow the show on Twitter and Instagram at Emotive Podcast, and our website is pod.co/emotive. Hope you enjoyed the episode. I am here this week with Ben, also known as Bensalot, developer of the game Geneshift, which is available right now on Steam. You can play it for free. You can play the multiplayer version by clicking download the Geneshift free edition. I'll have links to that in the show notes. So welcome to the show, man.
Hey, nice to meet you, man. Well, we've already played before, but nice to do this podcast with you.
Yeah, we've spoken in the past. We met a couple of years ago when you contacted me to play your game. And the one thing about it that, because you get emails from developers all the time, and and sometimes the game isn't quite up your alley, but for me, when I saw that it was this GTA inspired co-op game, that's what really drew me in. So if people don't know anything about Geneshift, like, what is the basic gameplay like for that?
Yeah, so you're definitely right. The GTA 2 specifically, with the top-down view, would be the first thing that comes to people's minds, but a bit more modernized in the sense that it has a Battle Royale game mode, which is the main multiplayer mode. There's also a campaign that you can play. And in terms of content, you have, in addition to all the vehicles and guns that you might get in GTA 2, you also have a skill system. So there's I think 36 unlocks you can get, like invisibility and teleportation, just to make combat a lot more fun and interesting.
Yeah, so it in the PvP modes, all of those skills do come into play quite a bit in how you approach the strategy for the different modes, especially like the bomb defusal mode. But I remember when I was playing that, you opened me up to a whole world of possibilities for strategies.
Yeah, so the skills work in different ways against players versus zombies, for example. The skills are mostly balanced for PvP, but in the campaign, there are sequences where you fight huge amounts of zombies. And in these situations, the area of effect skills, like the big splash damage skills, are extra valuable.
Yeah. So we're gonna kind of go through your path as a developer, because it's one that it's not your standard story of how somebody started a game and finished it. You spent, and you're still working on. You spent over 10 years working on Geneshift. So let me know a little bit about yourself and how you got started working on Geneshift.
Yeah, sure thing. So it has been about 10 years now, with the last 4 years being actual full-time work. Before then, it was mostly a hobby, which I started when I finished university, and I wanted to learn how to code in C++, and I just needed something for my resume as well. So I just thought, it would be fun to make a game because, games are about the most fun piece of software you can create. And I was very much playing games like Counter-Strike, Diablo 2, GTA, a small indie game called Soldat. And so these games became the influence for Geneshift. And yeah, so I spent the first couple of years working on this as a hobby while I, just had a normal full-time job. Then in 2014, I put the game on Steam Greenlight, and shortly afterwards, it got greenlit. And around about this time, I decided I may as well try and go full-time with it. I had always wanted to go travel the world as well. So I basically quit my job, did a bit of traveling, and while I was traveling with my laptop, I would just work on the game. And I found that doing this was actually, in addition to being just fun from traveling around the world, actually a really good way to use my money, because Sydney, where I live, Sydney, Australia, it's really expensive. And if you're trying to stretch your funds as long as possible, I wasn't going to last very long paying the huge price of rent in Sydney. But I found that some places, such as in Southeast Asia and South America, were really quite cheap, especially Peru, where I ended up staying. I spent 18 months just living really, really cheap in Peru, just working on my game and stretching my funds like 3 or 4 times longer than I could have if I stayed in Sydney. So I did that, got the game almost perfectly ready to go for release on Steam Early Access, but I came home to Sydney just before launching because as cheap as Peru is, the downside is that the facilities don't work as great. So the internet would cut out every second day, and I couldn't risk launching my game and then have the internet cut out on that super critical day. So I came back after 3 years away in total to see my friends and family and launch the game on early access. And I've been working on it ever since.
Oh, wow. Yeah, that's so much. That's so much that you went through just to get this, get this one game out to the public. And I'd like to just start from the beginning because, you mentioned that Geneshift started kind of as this something to build your resume, a project that integrated a lot of the games that you were interested in at the time that you were playing, going way back to like 2008, 2009 times. You developed this sort of demo that you released on your website.
That's right, yeah. So the game used to be called Subvane. And so on subvane.net, which is now geneshift.net, there's a demo that you can download. And this was how people discovered the game for the first 7 years or so until I actually put it on Steam. Of course, having just some random website on the internet, it's hard to find players, get way more exposure when you're on a platform like Steam. But I was able to get enough players during this time that stuck with the game that they sort of motivated me to keep on working on it full time. If I had just been me putting the game out into nothingness, I probably would have run out of motivation. But there are a few guys, especially players from the Soldat community. One of my friends posted the game on the Soldat forums, like the day that I back in 2009, put the demo online, and some of those guys still play the game today. And yeah, they just give me feedback. They motivate me to keep coming out with new versions. They sort of keep me accountable. So yeah, I sort of owe the constant development of this game to these guys' support.
Yeah, and so people know that Soldat is this side-scrolling sort of third-person shooter that had some unique game design to it, to where you could pull off these long-range shots by moving your mouse, and it would pan the camera, and you would find targets that were off screen. And you sort of implemented that element into Geneshift, but you ran into some problems with that later on.
Yeah, so it's a good mechanic because it does do zooming really well. You can, as the further you move the mouse to the right, the entire camera itself pans to the right, so you can see further off into the distance. And my game used to be like this until I put it on Steam, and then I realized that this was actually causing some people to get motion sick, which I had no idea about for like the first 7 years of development, because I didn't get it. No one who left me feedback on the forums ever mentioned it. And as soon as I put it on Steam, some people were leaving reviews like, it's a fun game and all, but I just get motion sick seeing the camera sort of move around whenever I try to aim. So I actually had to change this whole thing and sort of make your character just a static point in the middle so the camera doesn't move as you aim. But it was just interesting and highlights the benefit of actually getting reviews. And a system like Steam, people can and will leave feedback, especially if they've paid for it and it's making them sick. They'll let you know about it, which of course I really appreciate. And I was able to fix it up. It was the first thing I fixed because it was by far the main source of complaints that people had, amazingly.
Yeah. And how would you know without having that extra
Yeah,
feedback from players, having a bigger pool of players to give you feedback, you
exactly.
know?
I just didn't get motion sick when I saw it, but I was just amazed how many people did. So yeah, it just goes to show the Steam review system has its benefits, definitely.
Yeah, for developers, someone like yourself who's working on this thing themselves, like it's only you doing it, so you need to take care of everything down from the development to marketing and user experience and all these other
Yeah,
things that go along with
yeah,
it.
yeah. It's definitely been a great learning experience working on this game for so long because I
Yeah.
come from a coding background. That's what I did at uni, and that's what I did when I had a full-time job. But coding is just one tiny part of what you have to do if you try to make an entire game yourself. And especially something like coding is a very technical thing, but something like marketing is a very people-oriented thing, trying to communicate a message. And I browse game development forums, and marketing is something that most game developers struggle with, and I still struggle with it because it just doesn't come naturally, I suppose. It's great to learn these things.
It's evolving over time too, how you're able to get any sort of
Yeah,
reach. You really just have to use as many avenues as
yeah,
possible.
definitely. Like there was a time when back in 2010, I sent an email to Rock Paper Shotgun. And fortunately, they actually covered my game. And back then, that was absolutely huge because I guess that was like the main way that people got their gaming news was through reading gaming websites like Rock Paper Shotgun. And I got this one tiny little article, and my player base just exploded and had full servers for like the next year. But then,
That's
yeah,
amazing.
but now I have since then also got my game posted on Rock Paper Shotgun or even PC Gamer or a few other of these big ones, and it barely makes a difference at all. The amount of exposure and traffic I get from these is nothing compared to what it was just 5 or 6 years ago. Nowadays, it's all YouTubers and stuff, or even Twitch now.
Yeah, where people consume their gaming news and all of that is more through like either streaming video that's pre-recorded or live through Twitch.
Exactly. Yeah.
That's that's kind of how people get it. So do you feel like in order for you to get this exposure, you need to have people either live stream your game or you need to pay somebody to market your game and force it into people's eyes,
Yeah.
like somehow?
By far, the biggest challenge is getting exposure as an indie game developer, especially now when I think about 10,000 new games get released on Steam every year. It's just almost impossible to get noticed, especially as a one-man team with no marketing budget. So I have had quite a bit of success on Reddit, which is, Reddit is there's a lot of luck involved. But if you actually can hit the front page of Reddit, which I've done 4 or 5 times now about my game, then that's great. And that can bring in a huge amount of exposure and players, which is great. But that's quite unreliable. What I hope happens is when I actually release the game and come out of early access, I can do that and at the same time market the game to YouTubers and Twitch streamers, and hopefully some of those guys will pick it up. The thing is, of course, the big YouTubers get 50 to 100 emails in their inbox every single day, like you were saying at the start of the podcast. So the chances of them actually covering my game out of any of the other ones I get is also very slim. So
yeah. So I have a couple of elements of what you just talked about that I wanted to get your opinions on. Do you feel like it's almost like a chicken or the egg scenario with having a game that's multiplayer primarily, right? Your game does have a co-op campaign to it, and that's a whole other conversation. But in order to get people to play your multiplayer game, they need to perceive that it's like the hot thing, or it's something that there's already an established player base.
It is it's a catch-22 for sure. So I mean, they don't even have to perceive it as being hot. They simply just need there to be other people online, and people do play Geneshift, but it's not like there is a full server in every continent of every game mode. You know what I mean? If you want to play, you pretty much, I mean, I'm from Australia, but there's not enough Aussies playing the game. So I play on the US servers, for example. So there's a bit of a ping issue. I play with about a ping of 200, which is fine, but it really is, like you said, a chicken and the egg. If I want to get people to play the game, they will only do that if there are already full servers. But how can I get full servers if no one's going to take the first step? Obviously,
So you just have to,
I mean,
you somehow have to encourage them to play.
yeah, well, the approach has to be
yeah.
you have to hit a critical mass all at once. So what I have at the moment is through Steam, I have this demo, and people are downloading the game every single day, but they are sort of spread out across the 24 hours. You know, it varies from time to time, but let's say 50 new people download the game each day, but spread out across 24 hours, that's only 2 people joining every 2 hours. And that's not really enough to overlap and actually play a game together. Whereas if I could get all those 50 people to join at the exact same time, or better yet, get an entire month's worth of people to join on a single day, that would be enough to hit a critical threshold when you have multiple servers all running at the same time, and then people can come back and keep playing in these. The Reddit posts are great for this, and even better, of course, is just getting a massive YouTuber to cover the game.
You know, and I've seen feedback on the game before, and people have mentioned that if you had like a matchmaking system where a player wouldn't see that there's a bunch of empty servers, they would just see the fact that they're in queue to play.
Yep.
You know, it kind of hides that kind of negative connotation behind the player population. Do you think that's something that you could possibly tackle in the future?
It's funny you mention that, because that is exactly what I've been working on today. The main focus of my work today and this month is I'm redesigning the entire menu system, making it more modern, more professional, and also I'm thinking about how to deal with this issue. So I've already made quite recently I added a quick play button like you see in more modern battle royales, which avoids the lobby, so you don't see how full the servers are or not. I'm struggling with the idea of if I should just outright hide the old lobby entirely, because that in a way seems a little bit dishonest and it does take away functionality. But at the same time, like the business side of my brain knows that this is the correct thing to do for the game, because it would get rid of that negative social connotation of a game not being played.
Just from the player's perspective, I've seen the way some games have handled it, where they kind of have a big button that says kind of quick play or matchmaking, and then you have a smaller button for like we call like the advanced users or people who are veterans to the game. They want to choose; they can still go and choose their own servers if they want to.
That's exactly what I'm thinking I'll have to do.
Yeah, and that might be something that that will kind of remove some of the perception that people have towards that. So that's encouraging to hear that you're working on that.
The other big thing, of course, is bots, and I think my bots are pretty good. Most people in the Discord say that they're impressed with them. In fact, that they have played against them for like 2 weeks, and only after 2 weeks do they realize that they're even playing against bots. So that's a good sign. So I can use these bots to pad out the servers a little bit and fill in any remaining slots that actual humans, if there's not enough people in the server, get the bots in, and you mostly can't tell the difference. So
yeah, that's great, man. I personally like playing against bots.
Yeah.
And also, I wanted to ask you to just kind of break down what the battle royale mode is, and like what makes it different from other battle royales people have played. For one, I don't know if we mentioned this. I think that people could visualize it if you visualize like what GTA 2 was.
Yep.
Was a top-down shooter.
Yep.
And from that, what else is different about Geneshift Royale?
Yeah. So the main things are: one, you've got the top-down view. Two, each round is only 2 minutes long. And the reason why I did this was about 6 months ago, I posted this random like meme, I guess, joke on Reddit about a battle royale with like just 10-second long rounds. And I actually got a whole bunch of upvotes and positive comments and people saying, dude, if you make this, like I'll buy it straight away. And I was like, oh, interesting. Because at this point, the game was mostly focused on game modes like capture the flag, deathmatch. And of course, I knew that Battle Royale was all the rage.
Old school
yeah,
modes,
exactly.
Yeah.
I knew Battle Royale was huge, but most Battle Royales, they require massive maps, which just my game engine wouldn't really work with. And also huge player bases, which, as we talked about before, is a struggle for an indie game. But when I put this idea up on Reddit and people said, oh, this is really cool, I thought, oh, maybe I can actually make this work. So I came up with this idea of just having 2-minute rounds. So every 2 minutes, you start up in the air, you fall down, you do your looting, and the circle starts closing in really, really quickly because it's all over in 2 minutes. And then you have your big showdown at the end. And then you get 10 points if you win. And then the next round starts, and it's basically the first to 50 points wins. So it's a series of little back-to-back rounds. There's also one other cool mechanic, which is that if you die, you become a zombie. And as a zombie, if you kill a player, you can come back to life and get a second chance.
So it kind of becomes this like little tug of war match, and it's my favorite thing when we did play it was the duos, because there was something about that was pretty satisfying.
It's good fun to like work with other people. I've actually expanded on duos now into a full-on squads mode where by default you can play humans versus bots. So the squad size will dynamically change based on how many humans are in the server. And so you're always working together against the bots. But I had to have this zombie mechanic because if you die in a normal battle royale, like PUBG, then you just get kicked out to the lobby. But because this is round after round
in a solo mode, it would.
True,
if you're in a squad, it's like this down but not out system.
Exactly. Yeah.
But
I didn't have that as an option in my version because, well, you have to wait till the next round. And instead of just spectating for 2 minutes, it's more fun to just run around as a zombie.
Of course.
And you can also collect loot, which actually affects you in future rounds. So you still feel productive for future rounds because you can collect cash as a zombie, which will allow you to buy better weapons in future rounds. So it has this sort of way, the cash system sort of links the rounds together into building your character up to become stronger and stronger and stronger, so that by the final round, the ultimate showdown, you can go all out and, have the strongest guns and most powerful skills and all that.
Like the Gatling gun and stuff like that. Yeah, definitely you can see the influences of Counter-Strike coming through in that way.
Definitely, yep.
With the money system. Yep. Okay, so you mentioned how you've gotten onto the front page of Reddit a few times. I wanted to touch on that. Is it fair to say that just the community reaction that you've gotten through forums and primarily really through Reddit, a lot of the research that I did on you for this episode was just going through your Reddit history. You can see once you, at least in my opinion, as soon as you saw like using Reddit to either learn things from other developers or get feedback from players.
Yeah, Reddit has been a huge tool for me. Like, there's a few subreddits, like our game dev is a great subreddit to just ask questions. I don't use it that much anymore because I've already asked every question I could think of. But yeah, that's a fantastic place. I used to browse there all the time. And of course, for marketing, it's great as well. It's a tough balance with marketing on Reddit because understandably, Redditors don't like self-promotion. So whenever I do market the game, I try to do it in a way that gives some sort of value. Like I'll often pair it with a giveaway, just give away, 50 keys or something like that. Just so, I think it's win-win because I get exposure and some people get a free copy of the game. But if it takes off, if Reddit hits the front page, it's just crazy. There was a massive one at the very end of last year, end of 2018, where it hit the front page, and then 4 days later it hit the front page again, and my game actually became, this is kind of a bit strange, but it actually became technically the 10th most played game on Steam of all time, but it wasn't really played. It was because of bots farming trading cards, but that was a catchy little title that hit the Reddit love.
And let's get back to a little bit further back in the timeline. We'll definitely cover that.
Sure thing.
When did you feel like the Geneshift community sort of started to grow? And we're talking about like going back somewhere in between 2009 and 2014.
So it started to grow. So obviously at the very, very start, I had a small wave of sold out players which I mentioned before, and they have stuck with the game this entire time. When Rock, Paper, Shotgun covered my game, once in 2009 and once in 2010, they were massive, big spikes, and I got a huge swarm of players and a lot of feedback back then. But since then, it was more just like small little blips. Like occasionally, Game Jolt one day decided to feature my game on the front page, and that was quite nice. But nothing really compared to that massive Rock, Paper, Shotgun article, or massive at the time. Now, Rock, Paper, Shotgun just doesn't matter as much. It really is, like we were saying before, I have to spend some of my time developing and some of my time marketing. And if I'm being honest, I probably spend too much time developing the game because that's what I enjoy and am good at. Whereas the marketing part, it feels more like work, I guess. I have to force myself to do that. But of course I need to do that. And once I'm getting close to just finishing up the development because I just have to force myself to change gears. When I actually do spend time actively marketing, then I see more activity in the servers because more people hear about it, of course. But it's just a matter of actually allocating that time to doing that. And it's so creative as well. There's so many different ways that you can market, which I like a lot. I like the flexibility of it, and it's almost opportunistic. It's like, what's a creative way that I can get people to hear about this game? The most interesting way, of course, is making these Reddit posts. Probably the least interesting way would be just sending out email after email after email to YouTubers. But you do have to do that. Like it's a numbers game. And every so often I meet someone such as yourself, which ends up turning out great, So it's valuable to do for sure.
Yeah, I know that we're jumping around quite a bit in this. There's so many layers to this onion, right?
Yep.
I forgot to ask you about the game engine itself, because you coded this game in C++ and OpenGL. Now, why did you end up doing that versus using
like Unity or something?
Using something like Unity, yeah.
Yeah, so again, this was mostly because I started the game back in 2009, and I didn't even know that Unity existed back then, and when I did hear about it a couple of years later, it wasn't really very good. Nowhere near as useful or powerful as it is now. And two, I also just wanted to learn how to code C++, and creating an engine from scratch is a great learning opportunity. And also now that I've created the engine, it gives me a lot more flexibility. Like I can develop features for the game quite quickly because I know every single line of code that has gone into the game. Whereas if I was to use an engine like Unity, I would be limited by the limitations of Unity itself. And you can get around these, but that requires an extra level of overhead of trying to figure out how this system works and learn how the specific details of Unity behave. Whereas when you've written your own engine, I can just do whatever I want instantly. Yeah.
So you have that benefit, but it also took you that much longer to go from the inception to the release.
Exactly. Yeah. So if I was to create another game now, I of course would use Unity because I don't feel like spending 3 extra years creating my own engine. But I don't really mind those first 3 years because I was working full time. So I just had a job anyway. I was making money. I was enjoying it and still do enjoy working on the game, of course. So I just see that as a productive hobby, as opposed to an inefficient use of working time. But yeah, if I was to make another game now, definitely I would use an engine.
You developed the game for about 3 years as a hobby. Yep. And prior to that, I guess it had been a few years as like this sort of educational project that you had. You needed to have like a real job after university. Yep. And then you made this big decision it was a big decision to put the game up on the Steam Greenlight.
Well, I would say that putting the game on Greenlight itself wasn't a big decision. Like that was kind of just obvious. But quitting my job as a result of getting Greenlit, that of course was a big decision.
Well, of course.
I actually put my game on Greenlight on the very day the Greenlight came out.
Oh, I didn't know that.
It was kind of funny because there was this sort of girl I was dating at the time. She had already planned to come over on, I think it was like a Friday night or whatever. And then she came over, but I had just found out that this Greenlight thing was here. And I was like, hang on. I was like frantically trying to type up the description and all that. And she basically spent like 3 hours just sitting there watching me like try to Photoshop together a logo and all that sort of stuff. So I really wanted to get in there as soon as possible.
Wow. Yeah. Okay. Now that leads me back to another question. Was it the time that you had put into it up to that point that you really wanted to like put your best foot forward, or was it like an inner sort of passion or just goal to become a game developer?
I mean, I guess the reason why I have spent so long working on the game and I'm still sort of struggling through early access, preparing for the full release, is because I just like the idea of being my own boss pretty much. Like I love creating the game. And if I could make a living out of my hobby, that's just my dream job. But it's also, I think I read some statistic where 93% of indie game developers on Steam make less than minimum wage, because this is the same for most creative things. Like if you make music or write a book or anything, it's largely a winner-takes-all type game. Just because, well, there's a few reasons. Like the Steam algorithm, has only so much space on the store, and instead of sending every instead of giving every game equal exposure, it of course is just going to give exposure to the ones which are big hits already because they are more likely to make more money. Yeah, I know it's a risky career choice to try and become a game developer and actually make enough money to live off on that. But, if I can pull it off, it'd be amazing.
Well, you do have this base of knowledge already, though. So if you had to go back and get what you call like a quote unquote real job, you could do that.
For sure. Like I could go get a real job. So I'm not too worried about it. I'm going to, at this point, the things that drive me are, if I can pull it off, that would be amazing. So I have to stick with my game until it's at least properly released on Steam. And also I know that I would probably regret it for the rest of my life if I was to sort of just stop now, or maybe stop at the early access launch, because, in the grand scheme of my life, what's an extra year of work for the chance to have my dream job? You know what I mean? Yeah, like the extra money I could be making at a 9-to-5 job, that's just like, I could buy a slightly better car or something. But this experience has been life-changing and very informative, and it's just been a great time to wake up every morning and be excited to work on my game.
That's living the dream, man.
Well, just need the money, but yeah.
I mean, but your life hasn't been defined by the pursuit of things, the pursuit of money beyond like wanting to live within your, you know what I mean? Like you want to be able to live well, but you don't strive to like have a big fancy house.
Not at all. I mean, this is one of the I guess life lessons that this whole game thing has taught me, is that very idea that consumerism is just not really necessary, I guess. And also this time I spent traveling as well, where I spent just a year and all I had was just my one backpack, and I was sleeping in crappy dorm rooms, but I was having the time of my life. So I just didn't need any sort of stuff. I think if you can bring your cost of living down and just realize that you don't need more and more and more material possessions, then you free yourself up to do things like I'm doing, because I don't need to have a crazy high paying job to fund my, my clothing addiction or whatever, because I just don't have one. I can just scrape by on the bare minimum and spend my time doing what I love doing. Because time is like your most valuable resource, right? As opposed to money, which you can always make more of later on.
Was that mindset of only needing the bare essentials, was that something that was instilled upon you with your family, or was that just something you came upon your own by necessity?
Definitely not my family. I mean, my family is in no way extravagant. They don't go out and buy fancy stuff either. So maybe a little bit. I think my personality is just fairly content with just what I have. And then, the travel aspect really drilled that point home. And now that I'm forced to live cheaply to try to stretch my funds as long as possible on the game, and I realized that, it's just fine. It's just fine to not have all this fancy stuff. It actually kind of blows my mind that people will dedicate their lives so much to trying to, get a promotion or get more money or higher status or whatever it is at jobs that they don't even enjoy. Like if you have a high paying job and you enjoy it, that's fantastic. That's like the ideal. But if you have a job that you don't enjoy and you're only doing it just to make more money, which you think will indirectly buy you happiness, I feel like you can just cut out the middleman, find a job that you actually do enjoy, and just get the day-to-day happiness immediately.
Well, that's just an overall life lesson for people.
Well, this is just my philosophy. It's like,
What is your sacrifice? Is your sacrifice your happiness, or is your sacrifice things or resources? Or maybe you don't have to sacrifice. You just have to keep searching until you find that thing. You don't need to settle on
exactly.
one.
I mean, the only reason I have this sort of philosophy is because it's basically the starving artist philosophy. You know what I mean? So as a game developer, the game currently at least doesn't make that much money. It makes a bit, but it doesn't make enough for like a extravagant lifestyle. So I've sort of, I guess, in a way, been forced to adopt this philosophy, which I quite like. Yeah, because it makes me realize there are times when you're working on the game month after month after month, and you realize how much more work has to be done before you can release it. And you are aware of the stats that 9 out of 10 games fail to make minimum wage. It can be quite daunting. You're like, oh shit, am I have I spent the last 3 years for nothing? And that if the attitude was, only to make money, then being a game developer would be a pretty silly way to make money, because it's a very unreliable way to do it. But of course, then you give yourself a little pep talk and you realize, oh, actually, it's not just about making money. In fact, it's hardly not about making money at all. It's about, actually doing what you love doing. So yeah, I sometimes have to give myself these little like reminder to keep motivated.
Is that kind of like a mantra for you? Is to focus on the art and not the...
Yeah, just to figure out, I wouldn't have a specific mantra, but it's just this general idea that time is the most valuable resource that you have. And every hour that you're sort of just working for something that you don't enjoy is kind of an hour wasted. But if I do enjoy working on the game, which I do, just as, I'm sure that you enjoy working on the podcast, that's, that's creative work that you find fulfilling and meaningful. So that's time well spent.
Yeah. So let's talk about your decision-making process because, you had mentioned before you wanted to travel the world, but you also wanted to develop Geneshift. So those two things kind of, somehow, like I've never heard of this before, but somehow those two things kind of merged together. So talk a little bit about like how you made this plan to travel the world and live on the cheap.
Yeah.
And continue to develop Geneshift.
Yeah. So, I mean, the only reason why these two things work together is because Sydney is so expensive that pretty much anywhere else in the world, or at least any sort of fun traveling destination, is actually quite a bit cheaper, even if you are doing traveling stuff. So even when you take into account the cost of the occasional plane or, bus or having to rent a hostel, that still ends up being cheaper than just living day to day in Sydney. And so not only can I have more fun while traveling, but I can stretch my money further to actually work on the game. And because I work for myself and to make the game, all I need is my laptop and an internet connection, I really can just do it anywhere. There's actually a name for this sort of lifestyle called being a digital nomad. So this is people who have like freelancers will do this sort of thing. Basically anyone who can just work by themselves on a laptop.
Like a journalist or something, right?
A journalist can do this. Yeah. Bloggers will do it. Yeah. I mean, you could do it with the podcast, assuming you don't need to meet people face to face. Then yeah. And it's a pretty cool, it's a certain level of freedom, which obviously not all jobs have. But if your job does give you this level of freedom, it's just awesome to be able to travel wherever you want and still fund yourself. Yeah.
It's leveraging the technology that we've been afforded by the internet, and in things like powerful laptops and that sort of thing that you don't need to have. You don't need to have a home, or you don't need to have like an office somewhere to get things done. As long as you have the essentials in front of you, you could travel and work from a hotel room, or in your case, you lived in some of these like hostels and sort of things, right?
It's a bit of a loophole, really, because if you look at countries around the world, some countries you receive higher salaries and higher wages, but almost always in these countries, the cost of living also increases. So I think Norway, is the most expensive country in the world, or at least it was definitely the most expensive one that I've been to. And it was crazy expensive there. Like a Big Mac costs $20 or something like that. But everyone there also gets paid huge amounts. So it scales and stays in the same ratio, more or less, same proportion.
Yeah.
But if you can earn basically say a Western salary, but you're living in a less developed country, such as South America, then you get the best of both worlds. You get the high salary, but you get the low cost of living. So you can live like a king for really not that much money.
So you hopped around a bit, and talk about some of like your favorite places to live. I know you probably don't want to speak poorly on any of these places that you spent time in, but talk about some of the places that you stayed and what were some of like the some of your good memories from those places.
Yeah, so I spent like a year just traveling and was just working my game a little bit when I had downtime, but I went all over the place. Like my first stop was Thailand and Southeast Asia, so also Vietnam and Cambodia. That was a massive culture shock because that was my first time in a non-developed country, I guess you could say. So coming from Sydney, which of course is very clean, and then going to Bangkok, it was just like, wow, this is amazing. A huge culture shock. So that was always great. I traveled all throughout Europe, which was fun. But honestly, that was my least favorite continent just because it was so developed. It was so similar to Australia in so many ways and also more expensive.
Right.
I didn't feel like I felt like I was spending a lot of money for not much of a new experience. But when I went down to South America, that was, again, a crazy new experience. Everyone is speaking Spanish. Taxis are zigzagging all over the road. Everything just works. It's like everything works on a different time schedule. Like things are usually quite late, which I actually love. I love it's quite chaotic, I guess you could say, compared to a super efficient place like Germany. But
Yeah.
I find the chaos just fun. It's fun when I'm not dependent on. I imagine it would not be fun if I had to, get a train to arrive at work by 9. But because I just had my laptop, I was like, oh, okay, I guess, we're going on some crazy adventure through the city. But that was great fun. I also met my girlfriend in South America, who I now live with. So that the time that we spent traveling together there was probably one of the best months of my life.
So, wow, that's amazing, man. So you feel like there's like no way you could have any regrets about that time just because you learned so much from every place that you went. You learned about the cultures from each place, but also like what you enjoy about where you live, right?
Yeah, definitely. No regrets from that. That year of travel was easily the best year of my life. That was just so much fun. And yeah, you learn life lessons. It made me a lot more of a social person because I'm naturally a bit more introverted. But when you travel, especially when you travel by yourself, in hostels, you're just around strangers all the time, and you sort of have to force yourself to open up and, go try and make friends and that sort of thing. So that was really, that was a valuable sort of skill I picked up as well, I guess.
This is a tiny question, but it was on my mind. I'm thinking like you're developing Geneshift through your laptop and that. Did you have backups and stuff in place?
Yeah, so I've got like Dropbox and all that sort of stuff for sure.
I was wondering. I was getting anxiety thinking about you living in these hostels and you have this laptop and like
all just get stolen or something. Yeah, I mean there is a little bit of theft in these hostels, so you do have to be careful. Yeah. And I had a few other scary moments. Like one time when I was living in Peru for my 18-month stint after my travel, like my laptop just started making this weird noise, and it turns out that the fan in my laptop was just broken. And I was like terrified because, it's like a $2,000 laptop. How am I going to get this thing all fixed? I ended up buying a replacement fan and like doing some very delicate surgery, like unscrewing the back and replacing it. But if my laptop had actually died while I was over there, I mean, that would have been a major setback. I'm just very glad that didn't happen. The whole traveling thing is great. And also working by myself in my Airbnb in Peru was great. But there are some parts which were a little bit more difficult. Like, for example, when I was trying to work in the actual hostels themselves, sometimes it was fine. Like if in my hostel room there was like a small desk or something, I could just work in peace. But other times I had to work in the, say, communal areas and that was actually quite difficult because, I'm trying to sit there with my headphones in, hunched over my laptop and focus on some complicated algorithm. And like right next to me on the couch is a bunch of, travelers just like with a singing Kumbaya and a guitar and like just having a laugh and making lots of noise. And it's just like very, very distracting. And
it's so ridiculous.
You feel a bit like a weirdo as well. Like who's this weird guy who's not having any fun, just like always on his laptop all the time. So
that was actually going to be my question was about that part of it, but you came to it naturally.
So that was, I didn't do that for too long. I did that for a few weeks. I was like, nah, this isn't going to work. So I got myself an Airbnb for some privacy.
All right, so before I move on, I just want to know, like, what are some must-see things in the places that you travel?
Yeah, sure thing. So my favorite place in Europe was Iceland, which I just was there for a week, but I went during October, which I think is the perfect time to go because there's enough daylight, but you can also see the northern lights at night.
Awesome.
Yeah, that was amazing. Especially as I'm an Australian, which is Australia's a very sort of dry, deserty type place. To go to Iceland and see massive glaciers and volcanoes and snow and the northern lights, that was amazing.
That's my heritage, by the way. My
Really?
people come from Iceland. Yeah.
Ah, nice. Yeah,
Yeah.
I loved Iceland, and the people were great as well. I love that in Iceland, there's so few people there that they have this actual app, which like a dating app. If you meet someone in a bar, you can like plug each other's names in to make sure that you're not related.
Oh yeah.
Because yeah,
That's
um,
so true. Yeah. And Reykjavik is rated one of the cleanest cities in the world.
yeah, Reykjavik was beautiful. Yeah, so I love that place. I loved South America as a whole is amazing, especially the areas of Bolivia and Peru, because in such a small area, such a dense location, you can see the Amazon, you can see Machu Picchu, you can see these salt flats in Bolivia, which are like the largest salt flats in the world. So they're perfectly flat. As far as the eye can see, it's just nothing but like just white on the ground and then the sky. I went there in February or March, which is just after the rain season. And that's extra cool because when there's after it's raining, there's a very, very thin, like inch high layer of water across the entire salt flat, which creates this mirror like effect. So you can sort of see two skies, like you see the sky and then reflect the ground is just like another sky reflecting. Yeah, it's just incredible.
Amazing.
Yeah, so definitely South America, I think, was my favorite continent to travel through. It's also cheap. The people are friendly. It's really easy to just rock up somewhere and buy a ticket, like a bus ticket, or buy a tour straight away. Whereas when traveling through Europe, you have to organize stuff, often quite a bit in advance.
Yeah. And nowadays, it's not the safest place to be either.
Yeah.
Did you have to learn? Did you learn multiple languages before or during?
Yeah, so while I was doing my 18 months in Peru, I was trying to learn some Spanish as well. And I got, all right at it. I was enough to sort of make do, talking to people. I'd practice on Tinder actually quite a bit
Really?
yeah. Well, it was double-edged. It was good because I could meet new people, but also you can learn to speak in a more casual way as opposed to all the official Spanish things I was learning on. I used Duolingo, but that's quite, a bit more formal, I guess.
Oh, okay. Did you find the people in South America and primarily Peru? Did you find them to be welcoming to foreigners there?
Yeah, I think so. So the place it depends on where you are. Like if you're in Cusco, which is next to Machu Picchu, that's a very touristy city, and so they're used to Westerners or gringos, as they say, people with white skin are gringos. But if you go to where I stayed was Arequipa, it's not that much of a touristy destination. It's more just, basically just Peruvians going about their lives. So I would occasionally get some strange looks from people when I'm just like in the supermarket or something. But people were always really, really nice. Taxi drivers were always like fascinated to hear, where I was from. And they're like, oh, Australia. So cool. Yeah. It's a great place.
Yeah, Australia to everyone is this very interesting place because it doesn't really get talked about enough. At least the continent as a whole, they see it as either, as being like there's one or two cities that people will primarily reference, right?
Just Sydney and Melbourne, yeah. And of course, there's all the memes about Australia being filled with snakes and spiders and crocodiles, and which is all true, of course. But there's a large amount of Australians traveling. I didn't see that many Americans while I was traveling, but I think that might be because there's so much diversity within the US itself that lots of Americans are quite happy to just travel within the US. Like you can go skiing and you can go to the beaches and all that. Whereas Australians, it's basically just like desert and beach. And because we're so far away from the rest of the world, if we do go traveling, to like make it worth the money of a massive expensive plane trip, you stay there for a really long time. So you'll see Australians going on like 3 to 6 month long trips, whereas say a European, someone from London can just go over to Paris for the weekend and then come back and be at work on Monday.
All right. Now, this is going to be maybe a polarizing question for whoever cares that much. Like I care about food a lot, right? So which country had the best food?
Ooh, I think Thailand. I just love Thai food. Yeah, it was so cheap. Like for $2 or $3, I could get a massive mountain of food, and it's just delicious. I absolutely love Thai food. Yeah, I was also going to say the other one, like Italy. When I was in Italy, I spent a lot of time, sampling the food because because, they've got all the gelatos and the pizza and spaghetti. But I was honestly not that impressed. I think Australians, this will be polarizing, but I think Australians do pizza better than Italians.
Oh, no, you didn't.
Yeah. No, the reason why I say that is because Australians are just like, fuck it, let's just chuck like 50 different ingredients on top of it.
Yeah.
Whereas Italians are more pure. They're like just basil and tomato. And like,
that's right.
Yeah.
And there is this sort of mindset that when you appropriate cultures or whatever with food, I've heard so many like really respected chefs just totally throw that notion out the window, and that food is like this creative platform for you to mix things together and see what works.
Yeah, I think so. Like,
I certainly subscribe to that notion because I love all sorts of types of food.
Yeah, I think it would be silly to restrict the sort of food that you can eat based on what culture it came from. I mean, if anything, I think if I'm eating Thai food, that's a compliment to people of Thailand. It's like you guys, of all the countries in the world, I think the Thais just nailed the food industry.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So, but at the same time, showing respect for the historical nature of like where things came from. That's why you have to throw your respect back to Italy for having the ability to keep things somewhat similar to how they were in the past.
Yeah. I guess I find it interesting. Like, I'm not a particularly traditional person, so tradition doesn't. I don't value it very highly. To me, it's like something is either good or it's not. And so if you stick with, say, the old traditional version, just for the sake of tradition, even if there's a better alternative, then I'm just like, why not just have the better one?
That's fair enough, man. To each their own, I guess you could say.
Yeah.
Especially when it comes to food, everyone has their own preference.
Yeah, definitely. But it is nice. And when I would sample different types of food, like in Thailand. You can do all the touristy stuff, like what did I eat? Like a praying mantis, like one of those gross stick insect things. Yeah,
they fry it or something.
Yeah, it's massively fried because there's no way I'm going to eat that thing like normal. They had these spiders as well, but I was like, nope, not going to do that.
The spider thing I can't really do. There's this YouTube channel called Best Ever Food Review Show, and it sounds kind of generic, but this guy travels around and he eats all of these like local delicacies and stuff, and I'm just like, oh man, I don't know. Is it? I guess for him it's like worth it just to have the experience, but for me, I'm like, it's not really worth it for me. I'm good with. Yeah, I'm good with
McDonald's
chicken, pork. Goat. I'm good with that. But
if he actually has a YouTube channel, he can justify it as like, yes, I'm doing this to make a new video.
Yes. So we can live vicariously through his.
Exactly. Yeah.
So we can see like by the facial expressions whether it's a good.
Exactly.
Or not.
Almost always not.
Yeah.
But it's fun. It's fun to like tick off. That's another thing I like about traveling is you can tick stuff off the bucket list, But I did find that when people have a bucket list for traveling, it's usually something like see the Eiffel Tower or see the Colosseum.
Of course.
But I found that those were probably the least memorable parts of the trip. I'm just sort of like, you get there, it's never like, it's just never really good because it's surrounded by tourists. So you're not getting that authentic Colosseum experience like you might see in like the movie Gladiator. Instead, you're just, in a line surrounded by people taking selfies.
God.
The Mona Lisa was the worst. That's just, you can barely even see it. There's such a large crowd of people just taking selfies with the Mona Lisa.
So you're just in with the tourists. And
exactly.
That's not really an experience.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I guess you still have to do it, but whenever my girlfriend and I travel now, we try not to do like, let's go see the big famous city with the big famous attraction. More like, let's just go hike in like some beautiful nature or something like that. I feel like those sorts of experiences are far better for me, at least.
Yeah, and then let's just kind of give a brief overview. I know we talked about it earlier, but like where you went this time, because you took a little break recently and went on holiday for a little bit. So how was that?
Yeah. So my girlfriend is from the Netherlands, and we met just before I was doing my thing in Peru. But we now live in Australia, but it had been 2 years since she'd seen her friends and family. So it was about time to go back and to meet up with them all again. And it was great. It's great for me to see where she came from and, her school and all of her friends. So we sort of spent some time around the Netherlands, and we also spent 2 weeks in Morocco, which was a lot of fun as well. My highlight of there was riding camels into the Sahara, which is pretty cool.
Wow.
Yeah, the Sahara is just crazy hot. It's like,
oh man,
I thought Australia was bad, but the Sahara is just like, it's like standing inside an oven.
And nowhere to go for relief, really.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, there's no shade. Yeah, that was good fun. I love traveling like that. The 2 weeks that we spent in Morocco cost, I think, $1,000 or 1,000 Australian. So yeah,
2 weeks.
Yeah.
Holy,
which is, I think, pretty good value for money. Again, this is only because Morocco is it's a developing country, so it's not as expensive as if I was to do something like that in France. But yeah, those memories will last for a really long time. And I think, they're good for my relationship as well. It gives us activities to do together. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So spending money on traveling, that's probably where, if my game takes off and I make a whole bunch of money when I release it, I'm just going to spend a whole bunch of it just traveling the world.
Expand your horizons, man. That's awesome.
Exactly. Yeah.
So have you ever, and would you ever try to negotiate with a publisher or marketing team for Geneshift? What would it take for that to happen?
Yeah, so I did send out emails to the big publishers like TinyBuild and Devolver Digital, but unfortunately they were very, very busy and they just not interested in the game. If I could have gone with one of those massive guys, I would do it instantly, because typically they take about 30% of the revenue, but they handle all the marketing stuff, all the branding stuff, and just basically all the boring stuff that I don't want to do. And then I can just make the game. And I am sure that if Devolver Digital or TinyBuild was attached, like if Geneshift was attached to that name, the Devolver Digital name, the game would have way, way more sales than it currently does, because it's just, it's that social proof, and they have this massive marketing.
And they're established brand with credibility and everything already attached to it.
Yeah. So I tried all those big guys, all the big ones I could find, but there were a whole bunch of other small ones which I just didn't bother, because there are sort of scams out there as well, where you unknowingly sign away 30% plus the rights to your game. You give away a lot of freedom, and they basically do nothing to help you.
Yeah, it's like having a bad manager as like a talent or something, right? Yeah.
So I was open to the idea, but only for the best. I did actually hire a PR company called Novi Unlimited, and they were quite useful. They sort of looked over all of my assets, told me what things I could improve, like how to structure the Steam store page, this sort of thing. And they also sent out a big email prior to launch to a whole bunch. I think they had like 5,000 or 6,000 people on their email list. People like games journalists, YouTubers. So they were quite useful.
And this was in 2017, right?
Just before the early access launch. Yep.
Okay.
But the main success I've had for marketing has just been Reddit. I made a post on Reddit on the day of the early access launch, which got like 50,000 upvotes. And that was, I was just blown away by that. I was really lucky that happened.
All due respect, I think it was like the unique story behind it, because you said something to the effect of, I've been working on this game for X amount of years, and I'm about to hit the big green button. Ask me anything or something, right?
Yeah. Yeah. So definitely. That's pretty much right. So I optimized the shit out of that subject line and the GIF. I spent like an entire day, like in Notepad, like rewriting that one sentence to try and get it contain just as much information without being too wordy, trying to like get the GIF perfect down to the last frame to capture your attention. Like people's attention spans are so short, especially on something like Reddit. So within the first 2 seconds of the GIF, it had to have like a cool explosion. You know what I mean? Yeah, it worked, man. It worked, and I'm really grateful that it worked. It's weird because I actually posted that on that night. I posted it to R Games, not R Gaming. So I originally posted it to R Games, and then after 1.5 hours into the launch, like the moderators deleted the post because they were like, I don't know, it's no self-promotion, or you phrased it wrong, or blah, 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 something like that. And I was like, shit. And I was like, all right, I guess I'll try R Gaming. But I didn't even try R Gaming the first time, because I was like, there's no way they're going to allow it, because, it's too big and there's self-promotion rules. But I did, and that was the one which took off and got 50,000 upvotes. So because that moderator in R Games, which is quite a small subreddit relatively, because they deleted my post, I posted it on R Gaming, which is the massive one, and it hit the front page. So it's like, in a way, I should be thankful to that moderator of R Games for deleting the post. Yeah, it's just
it was meant to be, or whatever you want to say about it. You got a big boost out of it, and I saw that there was a ton of people that said, "This is amazing. I want to support you right from the jump." And you got a lot of feedback just from that Reddit post. Just
if
inside
that
of the Reddit post.
If that Reddit post didn't take off, I might not be working on the game anymore, because I would have just run out of money and also been demotivated, I think, because I mean, I struggle when I see other developers post on Steam, put their game up on Steam, and then I see them post about their sales in like R Game Dev or on the Steamworks developers forum, and they're like, I spent 2 years working on this game and I've got like 12 sales, and I just, like, breaks my heart, and because I know how much work they put into it, and the system is just cutthroat. It's ruthless. Most games just, they're just not going to get enough attention.
Oh man. How do game developers, like, what are some tips you could give people to kind of get people to see it? I mean, some of the things that you've seen that were obviously Reddit, you found a way to make these engaging Reddit posts and you've made it on the front page a few times, right?
Yeah. So you're asking for tips on how to do marketing if someone was to release their own game?
I guess, yeah. If someone, because I think it's true, and I don't want to be derogatory towards developers, but even yourself, you admitted that
we're not.
Like the marketing side of it really doesn't come natural to you. You obviously enjoy the development side of it. So as a one-man team, how can somebody, like, you have to kind of force yourself to
so if I was to create a new game today, I would create a Steam page as soon as possible. Like, this is something a mistake I made, because I put the game up on Steam as coming soon only, I think, 2 or 3 months before launching, but it should have been up there for like a year or 2 years before launching. So if I was to create a new game, I would put the coming soon page up straight away with just like, 1 or 2 beautiful screenshots, and that's it. Just enough to start collecting wish lists, because wish lists make a huge difference. Like, the Steam algorithm will look at how many wish lists a game has and how many people follow the game. And when you actually click that big green launch button, it will send an email out to all your wish lists, and based on how many wish lists you have, determines how much exposure your game will get on the main page. That's what you have to do. You have to have the Steam page up as coming soon as long as possible, like a year or something, and then you need to just force yourself to try and just build those wish lists, like, send emails off to YouTubers and of course the press. And if people link to your Steam page, some percentage of those people will click the wishlist button. And then of those people, some percentage of them will buy the game at launch. And if you go into launch with, like, I think I did the early access launch with, I think, 2,000 wishlists, which I could have been so much bigger if I had the coming soon page up for longer. But, a good chunk of those wishlists bought the game. I think, I can't remember what the statistic is. It's something like 20 to 40% of wish lists will buy the game for the average game at launch. Yeah, this is kind of like the most reliable way that you can actually somewhat guarantee some degree of success.
Is there any sort of caveat you could give people? Because you mentioned that you should have that Steam page up a year or two before release. Is there some sort of a caveat for people that aren't sure? Like, I guess if you have a Steam store page up, you're sure that you're going to finish the game, right? Like, what if if you're on the fence at all, maybe it's not time to do that.
Well, right? There's really nothing to lose. I think it costs $100 or something like that.
That's right.
To put your game on.
Because it's Steam Direct or something, right? Or
I'm pretty sure it's $100. Maybe it's changed, but it was $100. As long as you think you're going to make $100 back, and if you're spending months and months of your life on something, $100 is just nothing for the chance of success. So even if you aren't sure when you release it, it's $100, and spend 2 days making that Steam page look as awesome and polished as possible, and make sure you use good screenshots, because if you have some amateur in development screenshot, that's not gonna that's gonna turn people away. first impressions matter quite a lot. In fact, I'm still not even happy with how my current Steam page looks because I'm not an artist, so I need to make a better header image, like a better logo image. At the moment, it's pretty much just a screenshot, which is not good enough. So that's on the to-do list.
Maybe we can get some. If you guys have some tips and feedback for Geneshift, of course,
please,
let him know.
Yeah, please do.
You can find him at Geneshift on Twitter. Obviously, you can find the Steam store page. You can try the game for free. There's a free multiplayer demo on there.
Yeah.
And if you want to play the single player campaign, you feel free to support the developer. It's only $15. There's a ton of content in there. But before we get too far ahead of ourselves here, you decided to release Geneshift under the early access program. I saw something that you posted about this because this was one of those frequently asked questions that people have. What do you think of the negative opinions about early access? And how did you feel like Geneshift fit into that program versus it being like a 1.0 and you had extra features to add?
At first, I was not going to go early access because I felt like the game was actually like a full finished game at that point. And in many ways it was, because like a game is a subjective thing. The game has been playable since 2010. And, when is a game officially finished? There's no real clear line. So
who decides that?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I mean, that's usually decided by financial reasons more than anything. Like, oh, I've run out of money. Now I have to launch it. But yeah, one of the developer of Running with Rifles actually talked me into going early access, and I decided to do it because I don't know, it's just like a way of managing expectations, I suppose. That if there are bugs, and if you do plan on continuing to develop the game, which I did just because I enjoy it, it's better to be in early access because people are going to be more forgiving of you, I suppose. If your game has a few little bugs here and there, which Geneshift at this point basically has no bugs, but I still change things quite a lot. So the game right now is very different from how it was when it was first released in 2017. And I think if I had released it fully and then changed it so much, that may give people a reason to complain because they're like, I bought this product and now it's kind of a different product. Like the focus used to be on capture the flag and the campaign, but now the focus is on Battle Royale, which is a whole different thing. It's gone from single player to multiplayer in a way.
So you feel like it gives you more freedom to evolve your product as time goes on.
Yeah, it gives you more freedom and people are a bit more understanding, and it probably also attracts a certain type of person. The sort of people who are in my Discord, for example, are the people who are a little bit more, I guess you could say, open-minded to the development process. So they're like, I know it's early access, but I'm okay with that, and I'm going to join the Discord and I'm going to leave suggestions and feedback, and if I find a bug, that's fine, I'm just going to report it. Whereas when I do the full release, hopefully I get a lot more people buying the game, but these people are not necessarily going to be as tolerant. They're going to be like, look, I've put my money down, I expect a 100% finished product, which is absolutely fair for them to expect, but that's not going to be as useful as what I have right now in the development process. Because right now I get ideas from the community all the time, and they're fantastic ideas, and they don't mind changing things up a little bit. So I'm glad that I went into early access, definitely.
Huh. And if you were to do it again, you've enjoyed it so far as to that you wouldn't mind releasing another game into early access the same way?
Yeah, I guess so. I mean, to be honest, the reason why I went into early access was because I was running out of money, and I was sort of forced to release at that point.
Yeah.
But I am glad. Yeah, it's hard to say though, because I don't know what would have happened. I mean, for example, when I launched the game and then I had that big Reddit post, that was awesome, and I got a big spike of players, but maybe that spike of players would have been 5 times bigger if I didn't have the early access label on. I have no idea. I can't go back in time and run the experiment again. I feel happy with going early access, but maybe it would have been better if I didn't. I just don't really have enough experience to know for sure.
I suppose maybe you would have rather had your game in a further development state, not been forced to do it.
Yeah,
right?
I mean, ideally, I've really enjoyed working on this game by myself 100% because I have total freedom and complete creative control. And if I want to just take a break, I can without having to ask permission from my partner or something. But if I was to be working on this game in a team, even with just one other person, I would basically develop twice as quickly. So the game right now, in its current level of development, could have been in this state back in 2016 or something like that, because I would have been going twice as fast.
But then again, maybe you wouldn't have had this like inkling to put out this little meme about a battle royale version, and then you wouldn't have had that experience either.
Yeah, I mean,
so everything kind of happened the way it happened, and it's hard to go back and second guess.
This is another one of those just weird sort of lessons I've learned from working on this game. Like such a extremely strange thing to do with my life is just how big a role luck plays in everything. Like the luck that Reddit post took off means I'm still working on the game.
Yeah, so let's go back to that. This is December of 2018, right? Or
I've had a few big Reddit posts. I was talking about, well, for any of them, really. I was talking specifically about the one at the early access launch, because if that Reddit post didn't take off, I don't know exactly how much that contributed, but it must have contributed the majority, like over 50% of the sales in that first month. And if I didn't have those, probably I would have been forced to just quit the whole project and get a job.
Wow.
So yeah, it's just crazy that like years of my life all come down to the success or failure of a single Reddit post. It's like,
and the kindness of strangers, really.
Yeah,
right?
Definitely.
That's so insane. If you don't mind, we'll fast forward in time to this because we could talk about the time in between 2017 and 2018. But was there any significant events that happened in between there and like the latter portion of last year?
There wasn't that much. I basically just had a whole bunch of feedback from the early access launch, and I've just been very slowly making my way through. I mean, I was mostly focused on the single player campaign, but when I sort of finished that, I pivoted back into multiplayer because I realized that the single player really wasn't what Geneshift was all about. Like I think it's good fun and all that, but Geneshift in 2009 started off as a multiplayer game. The only reason why I made the single player was because I was aware of this whole chicken and egg situation of just how difficult it is to market a multiplayer only game on Steam. So I was like, okay, I need to make some single player mode. So I spent a lot of time making this single player campaign, but it's just not as fun. Like the multiplayer is significantly more fun, I feel, than the single player campaign. So when I finished the campaign, I was like, I'm going to go back to multiplayer again. And that's when I made this jokey post about Battle Royale, and that got some good reception. And then that re-energized me to work on the Battle Royale mode and adding bots and making the game optimized for multiplayer again. And yeah, ever since that's happened, I've actually been significantly more optimistic about the game, because the first 6 months or so after the early access launch, when I was just like slugging away on the campaign, I was like, I was just not finding it that enjoyable. Partly because when like a campaign, as the developer, I have to replay it over and over and over again. So all the fun gets sort of like stripped out of it from my point of view, because I've done it so many times.
That repetition.
Whereas multiplayer, it's like, it's better. It works better with.
It's dynamic.
So I don't mind. I still now sometimes find myself accidentally wasting time. Like right now I'm testing out the menu system. I test out the play game button, and then I'm playing the game, and then it's like, oops, 10 minutes have gone by from just shooting bots. I'm like, shit, I should get back to work. So I love the multiplayer. The campaign I think is fun for like a 4-hour playthrough, but it doesn't have much replay value.
Yeah, but it is co-op.
Yeah, the co-op is fun, and you can also play on custom-made maps, so that's where you can get your replayability.
Right.
But anyway, I guess the main thing that happened after early access was I finished up the campaign, got back into multiplayer, and then that all led up to this big free-to-play giveaway at the end of 2018, which really took off and kind of exploded, and that was awesome.
Completely unexpected.
I had no idea.
But for a variety of reasons, I guess there was. So walk me through that whole thing. You made this decision to have it free for like a weekend.
That's right.
Yeah,
It was like a free to keep giveaway for a weekend, and I largely did that just because I needed to get people. It's so hard to get exposure as an indie game developer that pretty much you either rely on luck or you just say, all right, I'm just going to give away thousands of copies of the game for free just to get some attention. And that did work because this giveaway, before I did it, I built a reference system into the game. So if you shared this sort of referral link around, then you could get a free copy of the game. And that actually worked quite nicely. Yeah, so I did see, word of mouth was working. People were telling their friends about it during this giveaway. And I did get a big spike in players, which became an even bigger spike when I posted about it on Reddit, which again hit the front page. But I had no idea what to expect with any of this, but it worked out pretty well. I got a huge amount of feedback. I got, how many people do I have in the Discord now? I've got a few hundred people in the Discord, I think. Yeah, a lot of feedback. I got a lot of sort of confidence in the direction of the game. I was like, this game does have the potential to take off if I can just hit the right audience. But yeah, it was like everything else in the history of this game. There was a lot of luck involved.
Yeah. And talk a little bit about like what happened on that weekend.
Yeah, so
where it was free to keep.
Yeah. So there was this weird thing about how trading cards work in Steam's algorithm. The way it normally works is if you play a game, it'll drop trading cards, but this only applies on games that you pay for. This doesn't work on straight up free to play games. But there's some like glitch or loophole in Steam's algorithm where if you take a game like mine, which is normally paid, but then you just give it away for free for 2 days, it still drops trading cards despite being freely available. And this little loophole, people have written these bots that exploit this loophole and download the game with like a farm of bots. And they play the game with like 10,000 bots at the same time. So what happened was as soon as Valve started the giveaway, my game, I guess it showed up on some lists. Maybe I also posted on Reddit at the same time, which helped get a bit more exposure. But very quickly, a whole bunch of people running these trading card bots started farming the game just for trading cards. And the number of players, like the actual players were maybe like 1,000 or whatever, but the reported amount of players, I think, was 200,000 at the exact same time.
213,000.
Yeah, 213 concurrent players, which actually placed Geneshift in the top 10 of all time list on Steam, which was just like blew my mind. It was like so cool. Like it was, I know it was totally unearned, but it was just like a hilarious story to tell my friends that you've got like PUBG, Counter-Strike, Dota, and then Geneshift. And I'm like, oh, what the hell? That shouldn't be there.
Yeah, and there was actually an article written, I think, in Eurogamer about how it all went down.
Yeah, it was just so bizarre, so crazy. But that actually still worked out well because just being on that top 10 list gave me quite a bit more traffic to the game. Like people would go to. I think this was.
I've never heard of this before.
I think this is on SteamDB or Steam Charts or one of those ones. They're like, what is this game? They click on it and then, some percentage of those guys bought the game. So that was actually quite nice. Like not only for the story, but for the extra exposure as well. I have since been kicked off that list, unfortunately, but I held it for a while.
But for a time you were there, and it wasn't your fault. You didn't intend to have. You didn't like hire people to farm cards. In fact, all that did was draw a little bit of negative attention. In fact, I think that you had people start what we call like review bombing you because all of a sudden Steam had disabled the trading cards from the game temporarily.
Yeah, exactly. So once Steam figured out what was going on, they had to just disable the trading cards. And that did solve the bot issue. As soon as that happened, you can see on the player graph that it just plummets back down to reasonable levels. But this unfortunately also disabled the trading cards for all the real people as well. And now they're just like, oh, why did the developer disable trading cards? Which of course I didn't. I mean, I like having the trading cards.
You had no control.
For me, it's just funny and cool to have 200,000 bots playing my game. But yeah, this was all decision that Valve made. So yeah, I did get on that weekend. A whole bunch of reviews came in. Unfortunately, most of them were positive anyway, but about 10% of them were just negative reviews saying the developer tricked us, doesn't have trading cards, that sort of thing.
Right. But at the end of the day, like right now, you look at your game and there's about 100 reviews and it's overwhelmingly positive, I believe.
Yeah,
or very positive. Is the way it looks right now.
The game actually has way more reviews. Those reviews are only from people who have actually bought the game, but there are 933 actual reviews from people, a large chunk of those guys who got the game for free.
For free,
yeah. But they, for some reason, Steam doesn't show those. They doesn't count them.
Publicly anyway.
Yeah.
Okay, I see. Yeah, I don't know how any of that works.
Yeah, they used to be included, but Valve had to change it because what some developers would do is they would just give away keys for free just in exchange for a positive review. So they were gaming the system.
Yeah, and those reviews must kind of play into the algorithms for
I think so. Yeah,
for exposure and that sort of thing. Yeah. Well, I mean, you as a solo developer, you have to throw everything at the wall and just see what sticks, right? Because you hustled your ass off and did whatever you could to get the word out, and it made an impact. And luckily, you had like we said before, like the kindness of strangers, people clicking upvote on Reddit and those sorts of things that help in the long run.
Absolutely, yeah. So I am really grateful to all the people who upvoted the game, and it really, like you said, you just have to try everything, and this is like a learning experience. Like I feel like I've done really well on Reddit. I have yet to get some big famous YouTuber guy to play the game. Maybe that will happen when it's fully released. I'm not sure. That would be awesome.
Sure.
But that is also just an art, right? Like there's an art to writing emails and making a catchy subject line to try and get the attention of a YouTuber or a Twitch streamer. So
yeah, you never know. You never know what people are going to respond to.
Yep.
And like you said, like in the future, you're going to have to revisit how all that works again when inevitably you reach that sort of that full release, or however you want to say, like you remove the early access tag.
Yeah.
So you are for sure going to be developing the game at least up until that point, correct?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, like the game still is making a bit of money. It's not quite breaking even, but it's kind of close. So I can still stretch out for as long as it takes to release the game fully. And then after that, I think I'll be satisfied with, as long as I can definitely say I've tried hard enough on it, and then we'll just see how it goes.
Yeah. So do you have any other future development projects in the works or in your mind that you've planned out for the future?
Nothing in particular. I don't even let myself think about it, because I know that if I did, I would start to get carried away and excited by, the novel new idea. Compared to just continuing to grind away on the game that I've worked on for a decade. So I am looking forward to working on something new, but I have to sort of stay disciplined, and
you know yourself well enough to know.
Yeah, well, this is
what to put your energies into. Yeah.
This is sort of like a kind of like a meme in game development circles, where it's like, what percentage of people actually even finish a game in the first place? It's like tiny. So many people will start making a game and then just give up after a couple of months, which is totally understandable when they realize just how much work is involved. Again, the only reason why I keep on working on it is because I sort of feel accountable to the current player base now. And I sort of feel like I'm close. I've put a lot of time into it, and I know that I have something of value here based on the fact that it gets good reviews and it has repeatedly been upvoted, but I just need to find the right way to release it and market it, I guess, which of course will be very luck based. Like I might send an email to a massive YouTuber guy, and if he happens to be in a good mood that morning, maybe I'll get a video. But if he's like distracted, or if it arrives in his inbox at like 2 a.m, maybe it'll get overlooked. So we just have to see how it goes.
We'll see, man. It's like anything else. It's going to take maybe a little bit of luck and opportunity.
Yep.
How does it feel to be close to the end? Are you kind of relieved that you've gotten over the hurdle of the Steam release and that you do see light at the end of the tunnel, or is it a bit bittersweet?
So I'm definitely more optimistic about the state of the game now than I've ever been before, just because I'm really, really happy with how this battle royale is turning out. It just feels like ever since I shifted away from the single player campaign and focused on the battle royale, I've just been getting far. I can just see it. The reviews are better. The feedback in Discord is more, people are more excited. So I am more optimistic. I still know that it's an uphill battle trying to actually market an indie game when there's 10,000 other games coming out each year. Like the amount of competition is just insane. But I guess I'm trying, because of what I'm doing is so the outcome is so unknown. Like it's not like a 9 to 5 job where each month I'm going to get the exact same amount of money regardless. Now it's like, depending on my actions, I could, it could take off and become a massive hit, or much more likely, get a few sales at launch and then sort of be forgotten. It's really hard to know. So I guess I'm trying to make it so that in my own mind, I'm immune to either outcome. Like I'm not outcome dependent, if you know what I mean. I'm trying to frame things.
That's hard.
It is hard. Like it's not natural, but I'm trying to basically frame things internally is like, what really matters is, did I try my hardest? Did I do everything that was within my control? And, am I learning lessons? And, I am sort of adopting this view, which I think is a great attitude to have, because then even if the game doesn't really take off and this is the amount of money it's made so far is basically it, then I'll be like, all right, that's cool. I learned a lot of lessons and I'll be excited to move on to my next project. And I definitely don't want to become so dependent on success when success is quite chance-based and also quite unlikely. But yeah, either way, like I'm sure that in like 10 years time, or for the rest of my life, I'll look back on this whole game, this whole experience as, a pretty crazy ride, and one that I'm really glad that I went on, because yes, learned a lot of lessons, and it's just a memorable thing to have done.
How could it not be after a decade of all of this?
Exactly.
Man?
It's like my entire adult life. Probably it's too long to spend on one project, but my next project, I will consider the size and scope a little bit better up front.
Would you
maybe
ever
work in a team?
Yeah. Would you ever consider, well, it seems like maybe you already answered this question, but would you consider joining another development studio or taking on a partner for a next project?
Yeah, for sure. I don't know about joining a existing project, but I have, a few of my friends are also into this sort of thing, like entrepreneurial tech startup type stuff. So yeah, I don't even know if my next project is going to be a game. Maybe it won't be. Maybe I'll do something completely different, like a website, or I have no idea.
Would you ever like join a startup development studio to get in on the ground floor?
Perhaps. I've never actually wanted to work in the games industry itself, like as a normal salaried game developer, because from what I've heard, usually it's pretty rough. Like there's a lot of overtime. The salary is usually not as good as you get in other sort of tech areas. And also, I think it's just like, burnout. Burnout is quite a big thing in that industry from what I've heard.
Are you married to the idea of developing games, or are you just going to kind of play it by ear? I don't even know.
Yeah, no, it definitely doesn't have to be games. I mean, this game, I feel like a lot of the skills I've learned from working on this game could also go into any other sort of digital nomad style project. Like I really do love the idea, and I do want to, for a good chunk of my life, be my own boss, work off my laptop, doing like a small sort of project. I don't want to be I don't want to have some massive business. I don't, I would much rather make a small amount of money doing some cool side project by myself than make a huge amount of money, but have all the stresses of running some crazy successful business. I don't think my brain would be good at that. And I also would ideally not do the 9 to 5 thing either, although maybe if I have kids I'll have to do that, I'm not sure. But yeah,
but you want to have that creative control at the end of the day too.
Yeah, I just want to do my own projects basically. But it doesn't have to be a game at all. In fact, I'm probably leaning towards not doing a game for my next thing, just to mix it up, and also because there's so much work that goes into a game, especially if I want to be competitive. I mean, most of the competition is made by teams of people working for years. So if I want to compete by myself, I'm going to have to work for, instead of them being a team of 4 working for 2 years, I'll have to be like a team of 1 working for 8 years, which is just a big chunk of time.
It's just crazy.
So I'd rather just make like a small, simple app for the iPhone, or maybe a website or something like that. Something that has a bit of a faster turnaround than another decade-long game.
Yeah. And I don't want to frame it for people like you're going to all of a sudden just abandon Geneshift. Obviously, this is
of course not.
This is something that you've been putting your blood, sweat, and tears into for so long. You're definitely going to continue it until it reaches a finished state.
Well, I mean, to be clear, if the game, if I release the game out of early access and it does well, then I would just keep on working on Geneshift for years, because if it actually starts making enough money for me to just live on comfortably, then that'd be awesome. I just wake up and work on my hobby all day. Like, I would gladly do that and love to talk to people in the Discord and get their feedback and suggestions and add more cool stuff. So all this stuff about working some other job, that's only in the event if the game eventually dies, right, and stops making any money. Then of course I'll just be forced for financial reasons to do something else.
Of course.
But yeah, I hope to keep working on Geneshift for another 10 years.
Let's talk about the optimistic future, because you are working on some new features for Geneshift. So let people know what they have to look forward to in the coming months.
Yeah, so the main thing that I'm working on at the moment is streamlining the experience for new players. One of the big issues I've had with Geneshift this entire time is, because I know the game very well and the people who give me feedback in the forums and Discord know the game very well, what we tend to focus more on is the high-level, advanced, veteran strategic balancing and stuff. So they'll talk about like, the plasma ball deals too much damage because this reason. And so I have in the past spent too much time balancing and optimizing this super deep gameplay that really only like 1% of the gamers are even going to care about. And I have sort of neglected the first impression a little bit too much. So for example, right now, what I'm doing this month is I'm reworking the menu system, because it's the very first thing that someone sees, right? They download the game, they see the menu, and straight away they're going to get an impression about the game. They're either going to think this looks like a professional, polished, fun game, or they're going to think this looks kind of amateur. And unfortunately, up until now, I think that the menu has looked a little bit too much on the amateur side, simply because I just find it kind of, menus are not the most exciting thing to work on, right? Like, it's way more fun to add cool new gameplay mechanics and actually new content. But now I'm forcing myself to be a bit responsible and, make the menu look nice and pretty, because that is going to give a better first impression. And I'm also doing stuff like we talked about, like making it much easier to get into a game by just clicking a quick auto play button instead of having to navigate a lobby and all that sort of thing.
It's funny that what you're working on now is maybe like the most important thing, even though there's so much content that you have for the game.
Yeah, I think it is. Yeah.
You're going to need this good first impression for the new people that are coming in. I know for me, in the past, games that I've been involved in, because like my background changed a lot when I got involved with this modding project. I became a tester for one of my friends, and I've helped him ever since his mod was the first year it was released in 2012, and we've worked on a couple of different projects. Now, I'm not a developer, I'm just a tester, but that changed my mindset for early access games and what the role is of people there. And I found myself a little bit more biased towards the developer side.
Okay, yep.
And like, but for the person who just wants to play a game, they're looking for a streamlined, user-friendly experience from the jump.
Absolutely.
And that's something that you're going to improve on here in the future.
Yeah. It's kind of like, I'm learning lately. I've been learning to put myself into, I guess, other people's shoes a bit more. So, because you have different types of gamers, right? Like, I have always been a more technical, concepts, mechanics-based player. So even when I play board games, like, I'll sit down and play board games with my friends, and they'll be like, one of my friends will pick up like a piece, which is like this nice, pretty looking piece with like a nice paint job on it or whatever, and looks beautiful. And they'll be like, oh, this is so cool. Look how cool this piece is. And I'm just like, whatever. Like, I don't care how the pieces look. I care about the mechanics. Like, how many squares can that piece move, So my personality, the way that I sort of view gaming, is very technical and deep. But I realize that that's not the case for a large number of gamers. They just want to, like you said, just start up a game, not have to think about it, just hop in, be playing in seconds, and just shoot some fun stuff and feel badass. And see some pretty graphics as well.
Yeah, so maybe in the future, having do you think that having someone at least to consult with, another developer, another mindset, not just from the player's point of view, but having someone else who's, you've referenced the game dev Reddit before and getting a lot of
exactly,
lot of help from there. Maybe the next time around when you go to make a game, whether that's going to be a year from now, 5 years from now, doesn't matter. You'll be able to see things.
Yeah, from
like you said, from a more balanced perspective.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I do speak to quite often developers of other games, like the developer of Running with Rifles and a few other similar games, like top-down shooters. And yeah, they're great to exchange ideas with. But yeah, definitely, I probably would on my next project like to work with someone just to turn it around a bit faster. And then in that case, I can bounce ideas off of other people. And I would ideally work with someone who sees things slightly different to me. Maybe someone who's a little bit more business-minded, for example, would be saying, hey, it's all well and good making this fun new gameplay mechanic, but we need to, purely from a business point of view, we need to add a referral system, or we need to streamline the
tutorial or something.
We have to like A/B test the menu system to see which one gets more clicks into the game, that sort of thing. Like, I'm aware of these concepts, but they just don't come naturally to me. I just really like getting into the deep mechanics. But yeah,
that's just in your nature, man.
Yeah, exactly. And I think it's good because it does, I think as a result of this, Geneshift does have a lot of depth, and there's a lot of fun mechanics and combos and stuff you can do, but I need to make those more accessible to your sort of standard gamer who's not like your early access style gamer who's going to tolerate these, like a weird looking menu system, but like a standard gamer who just wants a polished experience for their money's worth from start to finish, which of course is totally fair. Yeah, so these are the sorts of things I need to do. I just need to do all the important but slightly uninteresting to me bits of business development, I guess, before I can release the game properly. All the sensible stuff that needs to be done.
I think that's a very insightful way to look at it, and it all comes from your experience going from way back in your hopeful times of Subvane to now to where you're right on the cusp of
the big release.
The big release. So is that a bigger green button, do you think, or is it the same size?
I think it is bigger. From the research that I've done, the actual release is bigger than the early access release.
So the early access button is a big green button, but it's not as big as the other button.
This is like the entire screen. But and that's good. I mean, that means that there's a lot to look forward to. Like, the best is yet to come, hopefully.
That's awesome. Yeah, I think so too, man.
I've spoken to some other developers who had a game in early access, basically got nothing, like one sale a day, and then they released out of early access, and then it just absolutely exploded because Steam doesn't give early access games as much visibility, but when you release, Steam gives you like a 1 month of launch visibility, and during this time it looks at the player retention and how many people buy it and all that sort of stuff, and if it likes those metrics, it can just put you onto the front page and just make your game just explode. Well, I was also going to say, of course, the media as well also cares about the game being fully launched. Like, I know Total Biscuit, rest in peace, he would not ever review early access games because, well, they're not yet finished. But when it comes fully released, then he will take the time to look into it. So I'm hoping that there are some YouTubers who will care after the main launch. Obviously, the gaming press will hopefully talk about the game at launch, and Steam's algorithm itself and all the players. If all these different entities care more when the early access tag is gone and the game is like officially ready. Yes, hopefully that will be a massive launch, but I might need to get lucky with yet another Reddit post.
Well, it's worked out for you so far, and I'm personally very excited to see the future of Geneshift because I feel pretty invested in it at this point.
Yeah, you've covered it. We've played it together quite a few times. In fact, I think it was when we played, the whole reason why I decided to add the duos and then eventually the squads mode of Battle Royale was when we last played together. Oh no, the time before that didn't exist yet. And we were playing solos, but it was just way more fun when we just pretended we were on the same team and like just joined up anyway and just agreed not to kill each other. So I was like, oh, okay.
By the way, total faux pas when it comes to battle royale. Teaming is tantamount to a permanent ban if you do that in other battle royale games. So
unfortunately, we were playing mostly against bots, so they didn't really care. But
yeah, I know. Yeah. I'm just kidding. Yeah, it's funny. It's funny how things kind of happen accidentally sometimes, but for good reason too.
Yeah.
So let people know how they can play your game, and where they can find you to contact you for feedback, because you're involved in social media, and also you have a Discord server.
Yeah, so the game, you can just go to Steam and type in Geneshift, and you can get the game there. I would recommend just downloading the demo, because that lets you play the Battle Royale for free. And if you want to give me feedback, probably Discord is the best way. That's where I'm most active. And there's a link to Discord on the Steam page at the very top in the early access section, and a link inside the actual game itself. But it's just discord.gg/Geneshift. And that's where I usually spend most of my time. I wake up every morning. First thing I do is open up Discord and just go through all the messages people have typed overnight, and just keep talking about the game.
There you go, man. And free, no, nothing else required except for a little bit of disk space to play. So people should definitely check it out.
Yeah, cheers.
A battle royale game mode that with the rounds only last 2 minutes. It's a definitely unique experience. And for those like me, like people that come from the old school, it definitely pays homage to some of the old school multiplayer games with a modern twist to it.
Yeah. If you liked GTA 2, definitely check it out, because it's I would say it is the closest modern version of GTA 2 that there is.
And there's really no other alternative that I know of.
Yeah.
In the modern sphere anyway.
Yeah. I mean, cool. I really appreciate the chance to do this podcast, man. It's been fun.
Yeah, thank you very much, man. I'm sweating because it's very hot in this room, but I loved hearing about all of your journey from then till now. I'm humbled that you gave me the opportunity to interview you, because I don't think that this story really has. I don't think that this story has been recorded in this form before. No. And I think that developers can learn a lot of lessons from some of the approaches that you've taken along the way. Yeah, definitely. Happy to help, and happy to do the podcast. Well, thank you, Dan. And if hopefully we'll have you back in the future, maybe around the time of the release or before then. That'd be great. Yeah. Cheers.
Thanks again to Ben for telling me his story. That was awesome. And thank you for listening. Our music is by the amazing, talented Data Rebel. Special thanks to TipsyJack this week for helping me mix this episode. As always, you can find us on Twitter and Instagram at Emotive Podcast. I am Dan Dahlstead, also known as Orange Sherbet. You can find me on Twitter at orangesherb. Check out our website, pod.co/emotive. Next week, we have an episode, or maybe not. I'm not sure. I'm still in the process of booking a guest for this week, so hopefully I get something recorded and edited before the following Monday. If not, I'll see you soon.